McDermott is?
Yes.
How do you know Jane?
I've had conversations with Jane.
Are you aware that Alan Gibbets has quit as a result of the actions that we've been talking about in this hearing?
I discovered that through this trial.
Are you aware that Jane McDermott has changed her schedule as a result of the actions?
I also discovered that through this trial.
If your goal is to have fewer tickets issued, then reducing the number of parking enforcement officers on the street will help accomplish that goal, correct?
You're jumping to a conclusion there. My goal when I'm Robin Hooding is to save people the heartache of getting a ticket. So my number one priority is to save people from that hassle and hopefully make people feel good as a result of that. That's my goal.
So you want people to not get tickets?
I want people to feel good because they haven't been issued a ticket, yes, which is essentially a threat. It's a threat against their freedom. It's a threat against their vehicle. And I don't appreciate it when people are threatened. So that's one of the reasons I'm out there.
So I understand that you're saying that your ultimate goal is to keep people from getting tickets.
My goal is to save people from having to deal with the hassle of getting a ticket, absolutely.
So
Because it's wrong to threaten your neighbor.
So if there are fewer parking enforcement officers on the street, that means there are fewer tickets issued, correct?
You know, yeah, I see what you're leading at there, and it's my goal as a candidate for city council
Okay,
to...
Mr. Freeman, if you'd answer the questions, not the time for speeches. If there's a question posed, if you respond to
Oh,
the
I was going
question.
to get to the point. My point is I would like to see the parking enforcement department shut down entirely.
What I asked you though was, if there are fewer parking enforcement officers on the street, that means fewer tickets issued, correct?
Absolutely true.
You told Jane McDermott that you'd help her find another job.
There was testimony to that point, but I don't recall ever having done that.
Would
No.
you like it if she finds another job?
I think that people who work for the coercive organization known as the state should absolutely quit their jobs and do something productive for society.
So that's a yes, you'd like it if she finds another job.
Yep, absolutely. I heard that she used to do drug counseling, which really seems like something that could help people rather than hurt them.
You previously said that your goal is to shut down parking enforcement, correct?
Oh yes, I just said it a moment ago.
Thank you. Any questions?
Cross-examination.
Ian, what is your, this I take it as sort of, it's cross, it is also.
Yes,
So I don't have to do this
yes,
twice.
no, absolutely.
Ian, what is your occupation?
I'm a minister with the Shire Creek Church. I'm a talk show host with Free Talk Live. I'm the program director of LRN.FM.
And do you have a political philosophy?
Oh, most certainly.
Can you give us maybe like a short summary of it?
Sure, I believe that all human interaction should be consensual. I think that people should interact with one another on a consensual basis and not use threats of violence or actual violence to get their way. If you want someone to do something, you should persuade them rather than threaten them.
And is there a connection between that political philosophy and the activity of Robin Hood?
Absolutely. As I alluded to earlier, I think that the structure that the governmental structure around parking is one that's based on the threat of stealing. In this case, stealing somebody's vehicle or extracting money from them, basically a ransom, as Pete Eyre had put it previously. And I think that that parking should be handled in the marketplace because government is inherently inefficient. They don't do a good job at anything that they try to do. I mean, they try their best, and I think that the people that work for the government are people that have good intentions. I think they want the best for their community, but they don't understand that by using the threat of violence, they usually will create the opposite of their intended results, and it doesn't bring people together. It doesn't, it's not a neighborly thing to do. If the marketplace were handling parking, then each property owner would be able to decide for themselves what the parking spaces, how they should be administered. Maybe they want to just let anybody park, or maybe they want to have a very restrictive parking scheme in place. But I don't think a one-size-fits-all monopoly solution is the best option, and that's what government offers.
And you testified earlier that you were, the opinion, you were asked whether you thought that parking enforcement officers should resign. And I think my correct in summarizing your opinion is basically you feel like all government employees should resign?
Well, what I'd like to really see is the government, which is really just people, it's just men and women at this point who are, using the threat of violence to force their way on other men and women. I think that they should stop using the threat of violence. So I'd be fine if the city of Keene still existed, but if they just stopped threatening people. So they should offer their services on a consensual basis. Then we could have the first voluntary government. I think that'd be very nice.
Now, have you ever expressed the opinion that the parking officers, enforcement officers should resign?
I think that they should do the right thing, and I think doing the right thing would be to stop using the threat of force against others. If they could somehow keep their jobs and not threaten people, that would be fine with me.
Now, there was testimony, I think, earlier with one or more of the parking enforcement officers that you reported as expressing the opinion that to them that they should resign. Do you have a recollection of expressing that opinion?
I think I may have expressed in conversation the idea that I consider their job to be immoral, and I think they should do something more productive.
And I take it that is your genuine opinion?
Oh, yes.
And did you ever make any effort to actually persuade them to resign?
No, not particularly. I mean, just a general conversation about what I think about their jobs and the morality of it.
Do you personally have any belief that they are going to give any weight to your opinion about government in general or about parking enforcement in particular?
No, and in fact, I think that part of the reason why this whole process is happening is because questions of morality are very uncomfortable for people that work for the state. I mean, who would want to believe that their job is threatening people? I mean, they certainly likely don't think of themselves as folks who would want to do that to their neighbors. So it could create some cognitive dissonance when someone suggests, hey, your job is immoral. I can imagine people wouldn't really want to give that serious consideration, because if they came to the conclusion that, well, yeah, it is immoral, then that would be really uncomfortable to find out that they've been doing wrong to their neighbors.
For how long have you been engaging in Robin Hood activity?
Off and on over the years, I've been around since it started. Since Lauren Canario started Robin Hooding back in 2009, I've been involved off and on.
So off and on for 4 years?
Yeah, and this year, probably no more than a handful of times. I'm pretty busy with my business.
And you just explain, when you are engaging in Robin Hood, where are you typically vis-a-vis the parking enforcement officer? Try to locate yourself.
So generally, I like to be in front of, because the goal of Robin Hooding, as has been explained, is to prevent people from getting tickets. So the way you do that, or the most effective way, is to walk maybe about 15 feet or so in front of the enforcer, maybe 10 feet, whatever is comfortable, and identify expired meters, put a nickel or a dime in the meter to prevent the ticket from being written. When I'm doing that, however, if I'm out alone, and normally I am, because usually if I'm Robin Hooding, I'll be downtown for some other purpose, I'll be there to drop off some paperwork at City Hall or something, and I'll see one of them on the streets, and I'll have my cards and nickels with me in my backpack. And so, just kind of pick up and get started. So I'm usually there alone. The ideal situation is to have two Robin Hooders, one to fill the meters, the other to place a card on the windshield. And the reason why you want to have two Robin Hooders is so both of the Robin Hooders can continue to stay in front of the parking enforcer, because if you don't stay in front of the parking enforcer, at some point they're going to overtake you, and then they're going to be able to write a ticket at some point. So when I'm there alone, it's a greater challenge, because I have to put coins in the meter and also leave the card on the windshield. So for all the time, so if, let's say I'm 20 feet in front, and I find an expired meter, putting the coin in the meter, then turning around, getting a card, putting the card on the windshield takes a few seconds, and in that time, the enforcer hasn't had to write a ticket, so she or he is just walking and looking at the meters, so they're closing that gap. So it becomes very, very difficult for me to keep any level of distance, especially if I'm alone.
In other words, you may start off and get to the meter 10 or 15 feet, feet away, but by the time you plug the meter, put the card on, the parking enforcement officer has come much closer to you. Is that
Right, in which case, I usually find myself hurrying at that point to, again, add some more space so I have time to accomplish my task.
Are there any other times when you might come closer than 10 feet from a parking enforcement officer?
Generally, I am very respectful of people's personal space. I mean, if I were closer than that, it would simply be because we were having a conversation or something like
How
that.
about a crosswalk?
Oh, well, certainly in that case, they would be approaching me. It's similar to, being held up at a meter. If I approach a crosswalk or a corner of some sort where the parking enforcer has the choice to go in different directions, I need to know which direction they're going in. And sometimes they'll play a little game where they'll act like they're gonna go in one direction and then actually go in the other direction to try to, psych me out. So it's important for me to stay and wait until I know for sure which direction they're going.
Now, there's been discussion about 3 separate incidents where Robin Hooders experienced very substantial negative reactions involving either physical assaults or threats of physical assaults. Have you had that experience?
Thankfully, no, but as I said, I've only been out a handful of times this year.
Have you received any positive feedback from the Robin Hood activity from members of the public?
Constantly. The times that I have been out, there are feedback that comes from various members of the public, which include random people on the street, as well as people that own and work in local downtown businesses. I have been complimented, thanked. I've had money, gift cards handed to me in the streets. People in general are very, very appreciative.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Move examination.
A few questions today. Mr. Freeman, is it fair to characterize your testimony as saying that you can do your job most effectively, your job being Robin Hooding, when you are 15 feet away from the parking enforcement officers?
I wouldn't say there's any amount of feet. I'm only effective if I'm in front of the parking enforcers. So long as I stay in front of them, then I can prevent tickets from being written by filling expired meters.
And you said that 10 to 15 feet would be ideal.
I wouldn't say there's any ideal amount. That just tends to be what I do. I don't like the idea of invading people's personal space, and I would consider, it's not my goal to make somebody feel uncomfortable by close proximity necessarily. But at the same time, I do have to be somewhat close, because if they play the little game with trying to switch directions on me, it can be very inconvenient, and I have to run to try to catch up, and I'd rather not do that.
So you believe the purpose of being close is so that you can carry out your job to plug meters?
Right, well, and also, if I'm out for a little while, it's nice to have a conversation with somebody. Jane and I have had conversations, they've been very pleasant. Linda and I she used to talk with me up until this year, where she became unfriendly, and I'm not sure why. I used to have a really nice relationship with her.
Are you in the practice of talking to people that don't want to have conversations with you?
Well, Linda only told me this year that she didn't want to have a conversation with me, but I'd like to point out that as government workers, they are supposed to be able to be held accountable, and they're supposed to be responsive. If you look at the New Hampshire Constitution, which is supposed to be the set of rules that they follow, of course, as you probably know, the government doesn't follow its own rules typically. But
I asked you a
I'm-
very
Can I
specific,
finish my
I asked you a very
question?
specific question, which you're not responding to.
Can you ask that again then?
Yes.
Because I was answering you.
I asked you, are you in the practice of engaging in conversations with people that don't want to talk with you?
Well, I generally don't disrespect individuals' requests to not talk to them, but when it comes to government workers, if I would like to say something to them, I have the right to do that because they work for the state.
So you believe that under all circumstances, because government employees work for the state, that you have a right to speak with them?
Absolutely.
In every circumstance?
I can't see why I wouldn't. I have a right to free speech. And they are supposed to be accountable, open, and responsive. If they don't like being talked to by members of the public, they probably shouldn't work for the state.
Let me ask you a question. I'd like to direct your attention to these pictures that we were looking at yesterday. Turn to the first page, please.
Sure.
Would you agree that this is a picture of Officer McDermott as she's crossing the street?
Yep, that looks like Roxbury Street.
And if you turn to the next page too, do you agree that this is also Officer McDermott as she's crossing the street?
Yep, same street.
How are parking meters being plugged by talking to her when she's crossing the street?
Well, clearly there's no parking meter there.
Do you think it's a safety risk to talk to somebody while they're in the middle of the crosswalk?
Well, I would guess if you check the street and you feel like it's safe to cross, then no.
Mr. Freeman, do you recall saying, the city is worried that its parking enforcement officers will all quit and be irreplaceable?
Your Honor, that again is beyond the scope of cross-examination. It was covered in the original examination, it was not covered in the cross.
How is this covered, how is this fair for further examination? How is this covered, the subject area covered on the cross?
Attorney Meyer inquired Mr. Freeman regarding his purpose, why he does these things, what his political philosophy is, and I think I should have an opportunity to respond to that.
I'll